On today's episode of Homeworthy, we visit content creator and designer Madeline Scalzi in her home studio in New York. Known for her creative DIY projects and budget-friendly design solutions, Madeline guides us through her step-by-step process for transforming 3 ordinary household objects into stunning pieces of decor. With thoughtful tips and tricks, Madeline shows us that DIY can be so much more than craft. Get ready to roll up your sleeves and create something beautiful. You're watching Homeworthy, where we believe every home has a story.
Hi, Homeworthy. My name is Madeline Scalzi, and I'm an interior decorator and content creator based in New York City. Today, I'm going to be showing you how to create one of these adorable bobbin picture frames to really bring some color into your space. This bobbin style is so hot right now, and it can be really expensive to purchase it online or at a store, but this DIY is going to make it super attainable on a much better budget. So I have a few materials here that I wanted to highlight before we dive in. So first, I have just some scrap fabric here. You can use any style fabric you like. I prefer the stripes for this particular project, but I think floral could be really pretty as well. And this is 100% cotton fabric. I wouldn't go for anything with too much stretch. I think it's gonna be easier to stick with a cotton, something that doesn't have as much give. So 100% cotton fabric here. Then I have my sewing scissors, my crafting scissors. I have my wood bobbins. For this particular frame, I went with the 12mm, but there are a lot of different options. So you can shop around for whatever the width of your frame is. Just look for a bobbin that is that same size or a little bit smaller. So for this, I think the width of my frame trim here was about 14mm, and so these 12mm bobbins work really well for me. I'm also going to need some glue tape, E6000 glue, which is my favorite crafting glue. 10 out of 10 recommend it, but it will stick to literally everything, so be careful. Then just a little paintbrush here, another set of sewing scissors just in case I need it. I have my measuring tape, Mod Podge, and then also just Rust-Oleum flat enamel protectant. And then lastly, I have my paint for the trim of the frame. So I'm going to be using Citron by Farrow & Ball for this particular project. So let's get started. So first things first, I'm gonna go ahead and take the glass and the back of the frame out of the frame so that I'm just left with the bare frame. And this particular frame, you can get on Amazon, super easy. But also, I encourage you to use, if you find a frame at a flea market or even like Goodwill always has picture frames. If you find a style frame like this, please feel free to use that because it's a little bit better for the environment. So why not? So what I'm gonna do here is I have my E6000 glue, I have my bobbins, and I have my frame. So I'm actually just gonna pour more bobbins into the center here. And I calculated this pack of bobbins actually has about 200. I would recommend you probably need about 150, maybe a little bit more per frame of this size. So what I'm gonna go here is I'm gonna start in the corner and then I'm gonna work my way down. And the nice thing about E6000 glue is, like I said, it's very, very sticky, but it's quite forgiving in terms of if you need to reposition something. So for me, when I'm putting these bobbins down, of course I wanna try to make them center, but if for whatever reason they're not center, it's okay, I can fix it. I'm just gonna start gluing these down like so. You can see what I'm doing here is if your bobbins aren't completely in alignment with each other, that's totally okay. I'm actually just using the flat edge of a ruler to kind of align them. And that's really nice because you can go down the whole thing and do that. And again, with this E6000 glue, it's pretty forgiving. So if you need to shift them around a little bit, you totally can. I'm gonna go outside and prime this really quickly, so I'll be right back. Now that I've primed the surface, I'm going to go in. I'm using eggshell wall paint for this, but if you have an acrylic paint or any leftover paint from a previous project, I really invite you to do that. Again, anytime that we can repurpose previously used materials, it's better for your budget and better for the environment. So I'm gonna go ahead and open this up here. And do this with your heart. You really can't mess it up. Now that I have secured all of my bobbins, I primed it with that spray primer, and then I went through with the Citron and I completely painted the entire frame. So this is what it's gonna look like. Okay, so now that I've finished my frame piece here, I'm going to go ahead and start working on my mat. So for a mat, we're going to cover it in fabric. I have this really pretty yellow and green striped fabric that I want to cover the mat with. So what I'm gonna go ahead and do here is I'm just gonna lay this out. Let's see here. Let's do this corner here. And you're going to want to just kind of rough cut a piece that's going to be just a little bit larger than your actual mat here. Okay, now that I've cut out my fabric, I'm gonna go ahead and take my Mod Podge, and you want to face the piece of the mat that's going to be facing outward in the frame, and go ahead and put the Mod Podge on all of that. So here you go. You're just gonna go ahead and paint it on just like that. And again, this doesn't have to be anything fancy. It's very forgiving. And just make sure you get all the edges here. And if you don't have any Mod Podge on hand, you could also use adhesive spray for this step, which works really well. Just make sure that when you're using adhesive spray, you're doing it someplace outside or in a garage, someplace with a little bit of ventilation, because it can be a little bit stinky. Now that we've covered our mat in Mod Podge, we're gonna go ahead and flip it over. And the nice thing about using a striped fabric here is you can really align it with the stripes. Just a reminder, make sure you're ironing the fabric before you're laying it down. It's just gonna prevent creases and make it a little bit cleaner. So I'm gonna go ahead and just lay it down just like so. And this is nice too, because the way that the design of the fabric lines up, my stripes are perfect. And then we're just gonna press it down. Cool. So now that we've pressed it onto the fabric, what we're going to want to do is fold it over on each side. So you can see my fabric is a little bit longer than the frame length, so I'm just gonna go ahead and cut it to make sure that it is a little bit less than the frame on each side. So I'm gonna do that now. So now what I'm just going to do is I'm painting the Mod Podge onto the opposite side of the mat, just like so. And then I'm going to push it down here. And you want to make sure you're not capturing any wrinkles in that. You want to keep it really clean if you can. And then I'll turn it and do the same on each side. And it's okay if some of the Mod Podge goes over a little bit onto the fabric. It's all going to get glued down or cut off anyway, so no one will even know. Now that we've Mod Podged around the entire outside, we're going to go ahead and cut a hole right in the middle, which feels a little bit scary, but I promise you it's not. We're going to create an X in the fabric. So take it from the center to each of the corners. And I use my sewing scissors for this because they're a little bit sharper. And it doesn't have to be clean because it's all gonna get folded over or cut off. Folded over, glued down, or cut off. There you go, just like so. Cool. And now we're gonna fold it over. So I already have my Mod Podge here. And I'm just gonna cut each corner a little bit more. Sometimes you have to take it a little deeper into the corner than you think you do, so don't let that scare you. And then I'm going to push down the edge here and cut off the remainder. I have 3 different pairs of scissors going on here. What's going on? Just like so. And that's perfect. And then I'll do the same on all of the sides. Now that I've attached all the fabric to all of the sides with Mod Podge, I'm gonna flip it over. Look how nice that looks. Beautiful. Now I'm going to bring my frame back into the shot here. So we have my bobbin frame, and we're going to put down my glass first. So I would recommend cleaning the glass before you insert it back into the frame. Then you're going to put down your mat. And then I'm going to be framing this super cute little print that I found at the Chelsea flea market. I just love the colors in it. So I'm going to put that down like so. And then we'll close it up. And there we have it. This is a perfect way to add a little bit of color and a little bit of texture to your home. And it's a super easy DIY, so don't be afraid to take risks and try something new. I'm going to be showing you how to create a beautiful fluted petal lampshade. I'm really excited about this one. It's a very easy project any at-home DIYer can do. So let's get into the materials. What you're going to need is about 10 pages of canvas gesso paper, maybe a few more, maybe a few less. I believe on Amazon I was able to get a pack of 12, which was the perfect number with a couple left over. Then you're going to need some regular kitchen scissors or craft scissors. You're going to need a pencil. You're going to need a hot glue gun and hot glue. And you're going to need a ruler, or in this case, I'm using a sewing tape measure. First, I'm going to use this cup, and you can use any cup from your pantry, it really doesn't matter. And I'm going to create a template that I can use to trace out all of my petals. So I'm just going to lay this down here and create a little bit of an arch here. So once I have a few petals traced out on a piece of paper like so, I'm gonna go ahead and make my template. I've now used the template to make each of my petals. And it's important to note that you can make these petals any angle that you really want, as long as it's kind of a rough teardrop shape and they're consistent across the board, you're going to have great results. So now I'll just go ahead and cut out some of my petals. Okay, now that we have all of our petals cut out like so, for this size of lampshade, the top of this is, I believe, 5 inches, and then the bottom is about 8 inches. I use about 13 petals, but you can do more or less depending on the size of your lampshade. Whatever you feel most comfortable with, whatever you feel like looks the best. Again, you just kind of want each one to lay a little bit curved like that, so you do have to adjust for that accordingly. But again, the size of your petals actually doesn't matter a whole ton width-wise. It really has to do with length to get the proper look. So if you want to go a little bit wider, that's fine. A little bit more narrow, I would go just a tiny bit, but not too much more narrow than this. This is about 3 inches, 2.5 at the top, and about 4.5 inches at the bottom. So now that we have all of our petals cut out, I'm going to go ahead and flip this one over. So it's the correct side is facing up, and I have my hot glue gun heated up here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to place a bead of hot glue, and I'm just going to run it along the straight side of my petal. till about there. And then you have to work a little quickly because the glue dries. Lining up the top and the edge, you're going to press it down. And something you'll notice here is as you go around, each petal will be at a slight angle. So don't worry about if this line doesn't line up or the bottom doesn't line up perfectly. Really, the most important part is that these two edges line up perfectly. That's how you're going to get that cylindrical shape there. So you have like side to like side. And it's a little bit counterintuitive, but the glue is going on the side that's facing outward. So that's very important to give you that fluted effect. So this is what the first one looks like. So then I'm just gonna kind of keep going. And again, the entire time the glue always goes on the outward facing part of the petal. So I'm gonna put a bead here, again, along the straight side. And then I'm going to just press this down like so. For this particular lamp, I'm going to do this about 13 times. Again, I have about 13 petals. You can do it more depending on the size. If you're not sure about how many petals you need, you can always test it as you go. So start with maybe 10, and if you're putting them together and you're like, you know what, I think I need a couple more, just make a couple more. This project is very forgiving in that you can just keep making petals until you reach your desired amount. So I'm gonna have about 13 petals for this particular lampshade, but again, you can have more if you need. So you can already see my fluted shape starting to kind of appear here. So I'm gonna just keep going. So I'm actually just going to use a regular water glass here to elevate my lampshade a little bit so that I can see how it lays on here. You see, I want the top to just go about ½ inch over the top of the form, the lampshade form, and then about the same on the bottom. And it looks like, which is what I kind of suspected, it looks like I'm gonna need about 2 or 3 more petals. So I'll go ahead and do that now. So now that I've gone ahead and I've made it so that the lampshade is the correct width all the way around, you can see, I'm gonna pick this up off my little stand here. You can see it's the correct width all the way around. And you can adjust it. The nice thing is, pro tip, if you get sagging here at any point in time, what you can do is add an additional line of hot glue on the edge and just press that seam to be a little bit tighter. And you can do that on any of the panels just to make sure that it's not slipping down like this, because you want it nice and tight at the top there. Now that I've added enough petals to my lampshade where it circles all the way around, you can see it's all the way around. What I'm going to do is I want to overlap the last 2 petals here. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this around so you guys can see it. But I have 2 petals here and I actually want to overlap them like so. So I want the edge of this petal to go in the seam of the petal next to it. So I'm gonna go ahead and glue that down now. And because of the way that geometry works, don't quote me on that if you're my high school math teacher seeing this, I apologize. But the way that the geometry works of this is you might need to trim off a little bit of the edge of one of your petals in order to make them fit. So if you have to do that, it's no problem. I'm gonna do this laying down because it makes it a little bit more easy on my end. So you can see how these 2 petals are going to overlap here. And then I just want to take glue and put glue along the seam and glue them together. And I am going to trim off my edge of this petal just a little bit here. Just kind of give it a little squeeze there for a second. And you can use this petal below it to kind of hide that seam too. So if you kind of press them all together, like a little petal sandwich there. And there we have it. Our little fluted lampshade, just like that. And if you want to go around, if you find any of the petals are a little bit loose, or after about 24 hours, once the shade has actually sat on your lampshade form for a little bit, it might sink down a little bit. And that's a great opportunity just to go in again with that hot glue gun. Again, if you need to put a little bead along any of the seams just to kind of tighten it up, you can just put a bead along here right like that and just kind of give it a little squeeze just to make that seam a little bit tighter there. But there you have it. My beautiful lampshade. And I think it's important to note here that this is really the fluted lampshade in its most basic form, which is super chic. You can totally leave it like this. If you did want to elevate it a little bit more, something I would recommend is you could actually cover each of your petals in fabric. What I would recommend is glue the fabric down to your petal first. It might be better to kind of glue it, maybe sew around it if you do have the option of sewing, and then go ahead and add those using the same technique I just showed you. Also, if you wanted to add some trim to the bottom or the top of the petals, that could be a really great option as well, just to introduce a little bit more color, a little bit more texture into your shade. Or you can leave it just like that. Can I tell you a secret? This is a candle. But staging, it looks like a lamp. And next up, I'll be showing you how to turn vintage tennis rackets into a statement art piece you can hang on your wall. I'm really excited about this particular project because vintage tennis rackets are so hot right now in the interior design space, and I'm actually excited about these tennis rackets in particular because these were actually my grandmother's. She used to play on these back in the 50s and 60s, and so I'm really excited that I'm able to take something that can no longer be used to play tennis and turn it into a conversation piece that has sentimental value in my home. So right now I'm just going to go ahead and iron this ribbon. I've always been a crafter, but I'd say that I probably got started with DIY more seriously in 2020. You know, some people had their sourdough starters, some people were training for marathons, and I was in my apartment doing DIY projects. It just worked out really well for me because I had been married in 2020, in June of 2020, and so I was kind of just looking for a way to start making our house a home. And I really wanted to show people that you don't need a ton of money, you don't need all the fancy things in order to create a beautiful home. And for me, DIY was really that outlet to start doing that. So that's kind of how I got started, and I really love it. You know, on days where you come home from work and you're kind of drained, DIY has always been just such a fun, creative outlet for me. Probably how some people would find maybe baking or cooking or art, whatever the case might be, and it really just makes me happy. I feel like there tends to be some misconceptions about DIY. I think that when people hear the word DIY, a lot of the time they think of the word craft. And while craft can be a good thing with specific artisans and cultural heritage, craft can also sometimes come off as maybe cheap or less than. And I think that's something I really try to show people through my content is just because something is DIY does not mean it looks or feels any different than something that you would pay a lot of money for. And I think that's really important. You know, it doesn't need to be craft to be DIY. It can be upscale and it can be really nice and a piece that you want to have in your home for a long time to come. So once you've threaded the ribbon at the top, with between 3 and 4, maybe even 5 strings between the two sides of the ribbon, what you're going to want to do is actually pull out a little bit of the ribbon like this to make a loop, and that's where you're going to actually hang the racket from. And when you do that, just make sure that the two sides of your ribbon are still about the same size, same length rather. So it's going to look something like that. And then I'm going to give myself a little bit less. What you want to do is measure how long you need your ribbon to be for hanging. So if you already have an existing nail in the wall, I know I like to switch things up, so sometimes the nail is already there. That will help you gauge how much ribbon you need. So after you've done your loop, so now I'm going to go ahead and just tie regular knot like I would to start to tie my shoes. And then again, just keep that loop that you've pulled out as taut as you can. It'll just make it a little cleaner and easier for you when you're tying your bow. So I'm going to create my loop. Now that we finished this first one, let's go ahead and transition into our second one. So what we did on the first one was we added the bow to the top. So with the second one, because I'm going to be hanging them reverse to each other, I'm going to go ahead and tie the bow on the bottom of this one. And the nice thing about this DIY is it is very user-friendly in the sense that if you tie the bow and you don't like the placement, you can just untie it, give it a quick iron, and try again. As you can see, the way I've threaded it, I've put about 4 strings between the 2 sides of the ribbon. You can do more or less depending on the size of your racket. You just want to make it be in the middle and balanced as best you can. So now that we've made our initial knot, you can see here, we're going to go ahead and we're going to do the bunny method. So create 1 loop. I like to hold the loop in my right hand, and then I'm going to use the second side of the loop and wrap it around and try to keep the velvet face up the entire time. And with this last step, before I thread the bunny into the hole of the tree here, I'm going to twist the ribbon so that the velvet side remains up. And if you see that one edge is longer than the other, you can always retie it, or if you need to trim it, that's fine too, however you prefer. So we have the tie at the top and the tie at the bottom. You can see the only difference here in the way that we tied is with the top one, we put a little loop on it so it can hang. And with this one, we're not going to need the loop to be able to hang it. So they'll hang like something like that on my wall. Homeworthy, thanks so much for joining me today to make these 3 adorable DIYs. As you can see, DIY is so much more than craft, and it's a great way to elevate your space and add a little bit of color and texture. So, which one of these are you going to try?
Thanks for watching. Be sure to go to homeworthy.com for exclusive content, shopping guides, and so much more.